Hello and welcome to this week's video with myself, Chris from Sorare on a Budget. This week I'm actually going to be doing a three-part video, each one focusing on a different team from the Mexican League. This is just to give us something different to look at, especially in this mid-season break that we're in just now. The Mexican League is due to restart in late July. I think it's about the 23rd, 24th of July. Now, there's only three teams currently in Sorare in full, and I'm going to look at all those three, do a deep dive on each one of them in terms of positions, the ratings, the values, potential values of each player, and give you a little bit of background on each player. And yeah, let's see how we get on. So, as I say, first one's going to be of Atlas. They are sorted by position. The card that I've used here is a unique card for Jairo Torres. He is the most expensive player at Atlas at the moment, but I'll come to him. I'm going to start off with the defenders, however. Nice little picture of the stadium that Atlas play in Guadalajara. So, I'm going to look at the defenders. Now, you're going to see a lot of numbers here, and you may want to get some paper, some pencils, pens, whatever, just to jot down some notes. I haven't put quite the full amount of detail in here the same way I've done in other videos, because I want to keep this kind of short and sharp, but I am going to cover what everything is. So you'll see numbers beside the players' names. The first number is their last 5 average, the next number is their last 15 average. The first price is what they're currently listed on the market at the moment, and the end price is their potential price. Now that's based on looking back on the market, seeing what the highest price has been for them over the course of the last few months, and trying to work it out from there. So I've actually went with this, wherever the peaks have been, I've actually gone to Google, found out what the ETH rate was on that particular day, calculated it back. So I've done quite a lot of research here. It's actually probably the most amount of research I've done on any specific team, but it's actually a team that I've been quite interested in. I did have one of their players. I've also got another one of their players just now, and that's the very first player that I've got on the list here, which is Diego Barbosa. Now, he's a right back. He's only 24 years old, and he's contracted until next summer. He was basically an ever-present in the second half of their season, which the Mexican League is split into 2 seasons. There's, I believe it's called the Aperture, and there's the Closure. So it's the opening and the closing of the season, but they're both broke into separate championships. So in the second half of the season, he was basically an ever-present. He broke through. He did have an assist in one game. Very consistent in his scores. 47 average for the last 15 and the last 5. Now, currently, you can pick him up on the market for about £90. Now, I actually got really lucky a couple of weeks ago and managed to pick him up for 50. Some of these prices are slightly inflated on the market just now for Atlas. That's my one thing that I have definitely noticed through this. However, there is some bargains to be had. Now, looking at his potential price, he was up as high as £150 at one point, so there is definitely scope there. Fullbacks, you do tend to find that they can definitely pick up more points. I think I talked about this on last week's video when I was looking at the MLS defenders, and I was talking about Keegan Rosenberry, who then played at fullback at the weekend, scored a goal, and his price rocketed. So it's definitely something to pay attention to when you are looking at players. Not necessarily just looking at it, oh, it's a defender, where's that defender playing, where does he get most of his game time at? And that will certainly probably reflect more so in his value. So I picked, like I say, I picked this one up a couple of weeks ago for about £50 odd. The cheapest on the market just now is 90. So there's profit to be had there. If you can work in a deal, try and get that down. I would look at him as definitely a target. The next one on the list is actually in the picture, which is Anderson Santamaria. He's a Peruvian international. He has been a rock at the centre back. He played 15 of the 18 games. He does have a tendency for a yellow card, 4 yellow cards out of the 15 games. He also did score a goal as well. He's also contracted until next June and is also available for about £90 on the market. His peak price was about 160. You are going to get a little bit more utility out of him on the basis that he is an international. Now, I believe he had a DNP against him for the fixture against Colombia last night, or the early hours of this morning. However, he is normally an international. And so the next one I'm going to look at there is Martin Nervo. Now, this is one that you'll start to notice some of the prices are cheaper, and there are some reasons for this. Now, what I've found in my research is Atlas and Santos Laguna are actually owned by the same group. So there is a lot of loaning of players between the two and transfers of players between the two. So where you may see a card, especially with Santos, you may see a couple of cards with DNP against them, or they may be, surplus to requirements at Santos Laguna. They may show face at Atlas and get regular game time. So when you see the next video with the Santos Laguna players, kind of bear that in mind. Now you will see some of the players here have been on loan. So Martin Nervo is one that was on loan from Santos. He's actually going back from his loan, but he's also out of contract. Now from the various sites that I've managed to translate from Spanish, I have found that Martin Nervo is a target for Atlas, and they are hopeful of being able to re-sign him. And he's pretty consistent and quite cheap, so 45 average for both. You can see that there's a fair bit of consistency there. Priced on the market just now, you can pick him up for about 40 quid, if not slightly less. And his peak price was about £90. So you are getting a good bit of value out of him. Now that would all entirely depend on him getting picked up and staying in a Opta League. So if he was to get picked up in Mexico by another team, brilliant. He's still going to have utility. If he goes out with there and goes to a non-Opta League, then it is one of those kind of grey areas. But it's somebody that I've kind of got on my list. I've actually got quite a lot of the Atlas guys on my list, to be perfectly honest. The next one I've got there is Jesus Angelo. You may see him on, I think he sometimes comes up in the best value, because his average for the last 5 has been 68. He is the left back. He was also on loan from Santos and is due back there. Now, again, according to transfermarket.co.uk, he was due to be out of contract in the summer as well. Now, I would expect he would probably get re-signed by Santos. Now, whether he comes back to Atlas or is reallocated to Atlas, as seems to be the case with some of the players, it's up in the air. His price at the moment is quite inflated, probably because of that 68 average, sitting at 215 quid. Now, he's never been that high at any point, so I haven't put a potential price against it. I've actually put that he's at his peak price. Now that could be wrong, he could continue to increase in price, but that would be a risk to take. He is a Mexican under 23 international, so that may be something to bear in mind as well, because there's a good chance he'll be at the Olympics in the summer, which would mean he'd miss the early part of the season whilst the Olympics were on. So the next one there is Bretton Vazquez. Now he hadn't played in the last 5, and his last 15 was only 27, so he's a substitute. He is contracted to Atlas until next summer, and he is a former under 23 international as well. Now, as I say, very limited game time, but for 15 quid, if you were to pick him up for that sort of a price and he did get a run of games next season, or if he switches clubs or anything like that, then his value could definitely increase, and that could be one to keep an eye on. And finally, we've got Jose Abella. He is also another right back, and again, he's another one that was on loan from Santos. Now, his last 5 and 15s, 43 and 44. Now, he didn't play many games in the latter part of the season. He only really had 4 appearances, 2 assists, and also a red card. So quite an eventful few games that he had. But again, as you can see, fullback assists, it kind of sometimes goes hand in hand. Now, again, out of contract when he goes back to Santos, so what happens with him is anybody's guess. Again, 17 quid. If he was to end up at a different Mexican club, he's definitely one, that you could look at and probably still get some value out of. So, that's kind of an overview of the defenders. I have talked through that quite quickly, so you may want to go back and pick up, pick up a couple of notes from that. But as I say, I'm trying to keep this down in terms of time because I'm doing the three of them. So I'm going to look at the midfielders now. Now again, you're going to find a lot of lone guys right throughout the team. So the first one that comes up is Renato Ibarra. Right winger, was playing more as a right winger as opposed to a right mid, so you were getting a wee bit of value, but sometimes wingers can be hit and miss. Now, he was on loan from Club America. It's unlikely that Atlas are going to look to re-sign him due to his wage demands, so he'll go back to Club America most likely. He was embroiled in a domestic abuse case last year, and he was actually released but then re-signed, so I couldn't find much more detail on that, but there was some sort of sketchiness there. Now, his current market value at 50 quid, his highest price was about 85, 37 average for the last 5 and then 48 for the last 15, so there is a potential there for him to kick on, but he would be one that I would probably keep an eye on. I wouldn't necessarily take the plunge on. Our next one, I'm going to butcher this name, Edgar Ortega. Last 5 was did not play. His last 15 he's got a 24, so again it was a substitute appearance. He did have a couple of sub appearances in the first half of the season, but he was out on loan in the lower leagues from what I was able to find out. He does play as a centre midfield. He is contracted till next summer, so could he come back? Could he push for a place in the team? It's always possible. So 25 quid on the market at the moment, maybe a bit high. I'd maybe try and get that down to 15, 20 just because of the uncertainty. His highest price has only been is about 40 quid, but bear in mind the Atlas players only came into the game at the start of the year, so there's not a huge amount of data to cover the whole season on them. And the next one is actually a player that I got in a trade and was reluctant to sell him, but I sold him so I could rebuild other parts of the team with intention to pick him back up again. Now, his price is a little bit high at the moment, but when it comes closer to the season, it may vary. That's another thing with the Atlas players. There isn't a huge, there's not a saturation of the players. Some of them have only got 30 or 40 cards, some of them have got 60, 70 cards. So that probably plays into it as well. So there is a scarcity with those players. But in the game, he's called Jeremy Marquez. On your sofa score or wherever else you look, he is Angel Marquez. So you will find different things within those. So his last 5 was 41. His last 15 was 47. When I had him, he was very consistent and very solid scoring. I did sell him about that sort of a price range. It was a trade deal, so I think the trade value on it was roughly about, it was actually probably about 150. Well, I don't want an Norton update, thanks for ruining my video. Yeah, but I think it's about 150 quid I sold him for. So his highest price he was £250. He's an ever present. He is, I would say he's a very safe pickup. At 20 years old, he just signed a new 4-year contract on April 1st. They have big things in mind for Marquez. He's barring injury, he's a very safe pickup, and is somebody you could definitely see progressing on to bigger and better things. The next player I've got here is one maybe the opposite end. We've got Alan Reyes. Did not play over the most of the season. He had 3 short sub appearances early on. He is contracted to next summer. He spent most of the season with the under-20s. You can pick him up for about 20 quid. His highest price he's been was 40. That was kind of when the cards had just come out, so they were a bit more scarce. So again, you could watch from afar. Could he get game time next season? Absolutely, because Atlas do give their youngsters a chance. And my next one, again, was kind of a youngster, 24, Edgar Zaldivar. Now, he is a defensive midfielder, so you won't see high scores, but you normally will see some decent ones, but he has made most of his appearances from the bench. He had 4 appearances at the end, and then he played in the 3 playoff games that they had. He's contracted for another year and a half. He's got a full 18 months left on his deal. He did score in his first appearance. His average is only 24 and 31. It's because he's a substitute. His lowest price on the market just now is about 28 quid. His highest has been about 55. So there is scope in there to, again, could he kick on? Would they give him a chance? Will he end up swapping clubs? Who knows? But again, it's a low value investment, especially if you can maybe trade some, players that you've got at your club that you're not necessarily keen on keeping. If you see that maybe Pavel's got some, you can maybe look to get a trade and see if you can pick one up. But yeah, I wouldn't spend big money on him. I mean, 20 quid, probably maybe 10 to 12 or 0.12 or thereabouts in terms of the ETH value. But I'd say maybe 20 to 25 quid. So I'm going to look at the forwards. There are a few forwards that they have. However, they are quite scarce, and the first 2 you'll see I don't have a price against. That's because one's due to finish in 20 minutes from when I'm recording this video, and it's priced at 500 quid, and that's for Julio Furch. Now, that's vastly over his price range, and I think it's just because it's only one, the guy didn't have anything to budget it against. His highest that he'd been on the market was £200. Scoring wise, 39 in the last 5 and then 36 in the last 15. He did have ankle surgery in January. He only returned for a few sub appearances. He did get a goal, which is, would account for his lower scores and probably accounts for his potential price. The fact he's coming back from ankle surgery and he is highly rated, if you could get him in at a decent price, great. I just don't know that his price is going to come down. I think people are going to be very unrealistic with the pricing on him, just because there isn't many up to gauge against or to look at recent sales, because most of the recent sales are from a couple of months ago. So it is quite hard for folk to value. If you can catch somebody on Discord, try and talk them through, looking at the previously solds, where things are actually at, and get a better price, because 500 quid's, you could do an awful lot with 500 quid. The next one on the market there, or on the list, is Brianne Trejo. Did not play. Again, he was on loan, but he's on loan until December 2022. No appearances in the last 15, and I really couldn't find out any details why. I couldn't find any injury information. I couldn't find suspensions. I couldn't find if he was playing in the under-20s, under-21s. I just couldn't find any information. The main things I could find was write-ups from when he did sign in the winter, and it was that he's a dynamic player when he does influence games, but I have nothing to back that up. He does play as a right winger, so there is every chance that if he is back to fitness, if that was the case, that he could easily come in the place of Ibarra, who's obviously going to be leaving, and you could pick something up. Now, there wasn't one on the market. There was one when I looked yesterday, and that was at 115 quid. Again, way overpriced. The highest he'd been priced on was about 65 quid, and that's the highest he'd been. So I wouldn't be looking to pay much more than that. The next one, Javier Korea. He is another one that was on loan from Santos Laguna, due to go back. Plays as a centre forward. No goals in the second part of the season, and he only had one in the first half of the season, but he was a regular in the first half of the season. He kind of fell out of favour. Now he's going to be going back to Santos Laguna. Could he go elsewhere? Could he come back again? Who knows? And I think that's probably that uncertainty mixed, with his average, is why he's sitting on the market at 17 quid just now. I think it was 008 he was sitting at yesterday, so it's probably a bit less today, to be honest. The highest price he'd been was only 45 quid, so again, it depends on where he ends up. I probably wouldn't necessarily touch it. If I could get him cheap enough, I'd maybe sit on one just to see what happens. The next one is a name that kind of hit the headlines towards the end of the season, Ozil Herrera. Now he had a game against, I believe it was Necaxa, where he started kind of out of nowhere. He'd been a substitute and then he started and he got 2 goals and his price rocketed from about 30 quid to the better part of 100 or slightly more. Last 5 average of 43, that's reflected in his performance from that game, and his average for the last 15, 36, because he has more so been a substitute. He can play anywhere across the front. He's an under-20 international, so, and he primarily has been a left winger, but he can play anywhere across the front, so sometimes they've gone with 2 up top and he's been one of them, which I believe is what happened in the game where he scored. Now, he is sitting on the market. The cheapest one was 120. The potential that I put there was 85. Now that's kind of where he'd been, bar that one game. Now, obviously, you see a striker getting a couple of goals, especially at that age. Could he kick on? Absolutely. Is it likely? You know, you could flip a coin and say yes, no. He's a winger. He's young. You know, there's multiple factors to play into that. Would I be mad on spending 120 or 130 quid on him? I'd probably go 100. If I could get him for less than that, I'd probably be happy. I'd probably kick myself if I didn't, because I think he could well kick on. But it's a decent sized investment to sit on for a couple of months to see what happens. The next one is Brianne Trejo, again, 21, versatile, plays across the front, primarily as a centre forward, mostly just sub appearances. He did start the final playoff game. He did play out wing and he was playing in place of Ibarra. So whilst Garnica could potentially do it, Trejo did start as the winger there. Last 5, 37, last 15, 33. You can pick them up for about 50 quid just now. Now, I don't think that's a bad deal, especially if you can maybe work it down towards the 40 to 45 end. The potential price, he had been up as high as 70, but if he's a starter and more regular rather than the substitute, that you can only see that price going up. Speaking of prices going up, the last man on the list is Jairo Torres. He is kind of their star man. 52 for the last 5, 53 for the last 15. Cheapest on the market is 330, and that one's on merit. The highest price he'd been was 450. Now you could probably, that's a lot of money. That's starting goalkeeper money for some keepers in some of the leagues that I've looked at. Now he he's primarily listed as a left winger or a cam. He has played as a cam, kind of just sitting behind the striker. He was a regular in the second half of this season. Expensive, but he is only 20. He's an under 23 international, so that again may play into the early part of the season. Watching for him going to the Olympics, so those games at the moment aren't counting, I don't believe. So he will miss a couple of games, which may give value to a guy like Herrera, who may well pick up those starts at the start of the season, because that's their options, or it'll probably be first. But it does kind of keep things open as to what could happen there. But Jairo Torres, if you've got a big budget, I mean, I would have one sitting there, because he can get some decent scores in there, and you can look on Sorare data and see the averages that he has pulled. Now the last bit that I'm going to cover, and I've kind of saved the best to last, they're goalkeepers. So Camilo Vargas has been their number one. I played all games bar one. His last 5 was a 40 average, last 15 46. His value on the market just now is 450. The highest he'd been was about 500. I've listed his backup there, who's Jose Hernandez. There was only one on the market. It was sitting about 790, which is quite steep. However, from 4 different websites that I translated from Spanish into English, they're all very clear that Vargas looks like he's heading out of Atlas, and Monterrey are the likely destination. Now he would still be in the game, which is great. He would still be there to play as a starting goalkeeper, but it does give scope to who would be his replacement. Would they bring somebody else in, or would it be Jose Hernandez? Now at 190 quid, that's quite a steep gamble. If he was a lot less than that, I would, be looking at him. But 190 quid, again, they're quite scarce, so that could play into it rather than people necessarily knowing that, he's looking at moving on. But there's also a chance that they may get another goalkeeper, maybe the backup goalkeeper from Santos Laguna. So it would be a gamble to pick him up at that sort of a price. However, I think it was Del Boy that once said, "He who dares wins," and that would be quite a hefty investment for it. However, there is definitely scope there, and the next time round I will be covering Santos Laguna. So you may see that they have got a couple of backup goalkeepers. Would one of them come over, and you can maybe see and make your own mind up. So that's kind of the video for this one. I've got much longer than I anticipated, so I will try and get the second part out tomorrow, but it'll probably be late night if I do. It may well be Sunday morning, just purely due to my work schedule. Thank you to everybody who subscribed on the YouTube channel. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the comments, and I also appreciate the feedback on Twitter. I know for some, Twitter's not been great recently for having nose on. However, I'm on there all the time. I try to keep it positive, and if there's anything that's kind of narking me, I'll probably just ignore it because I don't have time for it. If you're new to Sorare and you're looking to get signed up, I've got my link there, sorare.com/r/Sorare on a budget. If you sign up there, you will get a free card when you sign 5 cards from the new signings market. And if you've got any ideas for any upcoming videos or upcoming series, drop me a message. I'm always keen to hear what people have to say and kind of get some ideas for the future. So with that, thank you very much. I will speak to you again in the next day or two, looking at Santos Laguna. And yeah, thank you very much again. Cheers.